Ladies and gentlemen, Behind the Line proudly presents to you another exciting edition of The Woke! Turning on the Woke. This episode is brought to you by The Bitter Critter. Are you experiencing strange feelings of joy when you should be filled with fake outrage? Do you need to disguise your feelings of happiness to your audience so you can deliver your usual bitter tangents? If you need to feel bitter, purchase The Bitter Critter. The Bitter Critter is specifically designed to incite bad moods. Within 15 to 30 seconds, The Bitter Critter will transform you into an angry old man who hasn't touched a woman since birth. This amazing product has been used by Keith Olbermann and Rachel Maddow to ensure normal women never approach them. Start your free trial today by visiting bittervirgins.com. Oh, the venom and fake outrage. It has once again infected Keith Olbermann. Keithy Poo, Keithy Poo. Anytime we talk about Keithy here on the channel, I always repeat the same warning. I know my daily viewers have heard this warning countless times, but it needs to be repeated because it's so important. If you're an aspiring parishioner at Woke United Methodist, if you're a young man who currently ties 10% of his income to the church, hoping that you will one day be promoted from parishioner to deacon, let me give you a little preview of what you could look like in 20 years. You see this face? This is the face of a man who has not touched a woman who is capable of breathing without the assistance of an air compressor in decades. This is the face of a man who has spent the last 3, maybe 4 decades working in the mainstream media, where his only job was pretending to be outraged. This is what happens when you live a life filled with bitterness. You become a lonely, aging fossil with no friends, spending your weekends playing with your plethora of cats because that is the only feline that is willing to touch you. If you haven't already, make sure to like and subscribe. You can follow me on Twitter at KC_BTL84. In terms of this audience, my audience, which unlike the audience of Keith Olbermann, my audience is filled with logical, normal people. The general consensus amongst my audience is that CNN, they were fair last week while moderating the presidential debate. Matter of fact, CNN has been surprisingly, well, for lack of a better word, and this is not a word that I would typically use to describe CNN, but since the debate last week, CNN has been surprisingly honest when it comes to the debate performance of Johnny B. Biden. CNN followed the rules of the debate, rules that were given to them by their fearless leader. Neither candidate was given preferential treatment. They were both given equal amounts of time to speak, or in the case of John Biden, mumble incoherently in languages that have yet to be discovered. Most normal people believe that CNN did a good job moderating the debate. Not Keith Olbermann, though. No! According to Keithy Poo, this debate was an unmitigated disaster, which it was for John Biden. But like most deacons at Woke United Methodist, along with the Yentas on The View, Keith Olbermann, he refuses to blame John Biden for his own huge embarrassing failure. Instead, Keith Olbermann, he is blaming CNN. Before I show you this clip, let me tell you how far Keithy Poo has fallen in the bruised caboose of irrelevance. Now you gotta remember, Keith Olbermann, he used to be a big star. He used to have influence. He was constantly generating headlines in the mainstream media when he hosted that polished turd on MSNBC. The clip I'm about to show you guys, this is from last Thursday's episode of Keithy Poo's podcast, Countdown to Irrelevance. Now, of course, for Keithy, the countdown to irrelevance ran out of time years ago because he's already there. After the debate Thursday night, Keith Olbermann, he applied the bitter critter and exposed the dozens of people watching him to one of his vicious tirades. He was very angry. He was upset that CNN refused to fact check all the lies during the debate. Now, I happen to partially agree with Keithy. I do think CNN could have done a better job fact-checking the lies coming from Johnny B. Biden. But Keithy and his pretend friends in the mainstream media, they keep referencing the supposed lies that were coming from Donald Trump. Orange man bad! Now, of course, I have yet to see one of them point out one of these lies coming from the Trumper. Deacon Stephen A. Smith, he was complaining Monday on YouTube about the supposed lies of the Trumper, but like Keithy, Stevie, he failed to point out a single lie. I wonder why. But anyway, I'll give you a second to put on your woke hat so we can fully understand the musings of a maniac. Watch for yourself.
What you have seen is a debate with three participants, Joe Biden versus the tag team of Donald Trump and CNN. The decision to not fact check the fire hose of lies that is Donald Trump, that is the entirety of his existence and the entirety of his campaign, the decision to not fact check any one of those lies by CNN was one of the most immoral decisions in the history of the free press in this country. Literally, I am suggesting that at some point tonight, CNN should, it will not, go off the air in shame, fire everybody, seal off the buildings, make sure everybody's out, and burn the goddamn place to the ground.
What? Excuse me? Come again? Let me get this straight. Let me make sure I'm understanding you correctly. Keithy Pooh, you expect me to believe that CNN was tag teaming with Donald Trump? The same CNN that features unknown stars like Jake the Bongo Tapper pretending to break down in tears when they're exposed to the spray tan of the Orange Man? The same CNN that donates woke welfare to Caitlin Collins, Katie Roo, whose only responsibility is spreading propaganda about the Trumper? The same CNN that employs Andy Cooper and Wolf Blitzer? Woof, woof, woof. The same CNN that employs Chris Wallace. Who's talking to Chris Wallace? I know who's not talking to Chris Wallace. The same demo who refuses to talk to Keith Olbermann. Women. You expect me to believe that CNN conspired with the Trumper to make Johnny B. Biden look bad? Really? Trump didn't need help to make Johnny look bad. The only thing Trump had to do was follow the advice given to him by his advisors. Shut the hell up and let Johnny B. Biden bury himself. Maybe you could say CNN helped the Trumper by letting John Biden borrow the woke shovel, but if Johnny didn't borrow the shovel from Jake the Bongo Tapper, he would have borrowed it from one of the dozens of people from the woke media who were in the spin room combining their collective brain cell, trying to polish this steaming turd to make it presentable to the public. You know, if Keith Olbermann was like an alcoholic, at least he'd have an excuse. Now, I'm glad he's not an alcoholic. I would not wish the disease of alcoholism on anyone, but if Keithy struggled with alcohol or something like that, at least he would have an excuse for this insanity. But this dude, he is sober. This is how he thinks. Keith Olbermann went on WBN, the Woke Broadcasting Network, the only network that is willing to give him pesos in exchange for his incoherent babbling. But this dude went on WBN, and he demanded that CNN be burned to the ground? Normal people have been wanting to see CNN extinguished for a decade. The one time CNN does something right, the first time in probably 10 years that CNN is actually fair and balanced, unbiased, and Keith Olbermann, along with his pretend friends in the mainstream media, they want CNN to be thrown off the air? Doesn't make sense to me, but what the hell do I know? I'm not a wanker spanker. Believe it or not, part of me actually feels bad for Keith Olbermann. It's a very small part, but part of me does feel bad for Keithy. This dude once had a legacy. If you grew up in the 90s, the SportsCenter duo of Keith Olbermann and Dan Patrick, it was absolutely legendary. Back then, ESPN had actual stars hosting SportsCenter. Keithy Pooh and Danny P, Stuart Scott, Linda Cohn, Rich Eisen, Craig Kilborn, Charlie Steiner, maybe? I can't remember his last name, the curly-haired dude that wore the glasses. But the duo of Keith Olbermann and Dan Patrick, they were the best that ESPN had to offer. I can still remember Dan Patrick announcing the return of Michael Jordan to the NBA. They didn't need scripts, they could improv most of the show. Because outside of the studio, Keith Olbermann and Dan Patrick, they were friends, they had chemistry. Now, God only knows who's hosting SportsCenter. I would be surprised if they talked about sports on SportsCenter. Today, the show features Elle Duncan crying about abortion or Malika Andrews lecturing men because they're toxically masculine. But even during his first run at MSNBC, Keith Olbermann was somewhat normal. Now, I didn't agree with him politically, but I don't have to agree with you politically to like your show. I don't agree with Rachel Maddow, but I used to watch her show on MSNBC until she became obsessed with the illusion of Russian collusion. But over the years, something happened to Keith Olbermann. He became radical. This dude became so radical, MSNBC threw him off the air. Keith Olbermann was so radical, he was suspended by the worldwide leader in woke. For a while, he had fallen so far, he was working for some dump called Current TV. Currently, Current TV no longer exists because no one was watching it. Keith Olbermann was the biggest star at the network. Hell, he was the only star at the network. Less than a year into his contract, Keith Olbermann, he was fired by Current TV. Why? Do I really need to explain? The guy's a maniac. There is not a single media outlet in the country willing to work with Keith Olbermann. Just think about that for a second. MSNBC, they are willing to work with Joy Reid. They were willing to work with Tiffany Cross, Tiffer the Bongo Sniffer. Hell, MSNBC, they are willing to work with Al Sharpton. CNN has a roster of huge embarrassing failures that are unknown to 99% of the population. Keith Olbermann, he would be the biggest star at CNN by far, but no one is willing to work with him. Think about how radical you gotta be to be completely ostracized by the mainstream media. The same media who pushes transgender athletes in sports. The same media who claimed the riots in 2020 were peaceful protests. The same media who relentlessly talked about January 6th until it was recently revealed that Nancy Pelosi might be at fault. Then, all of a sudden, the daily discussions about January 6th, they suddenly disappeared. Keith Olbermann, he can't get a job in that media. Give me your thoughts. Keith Olbermann unleashes another incoherent tirade demanding that CNN be burned to the ground. I thought CNN did an excellent job moderating the debate. Can anyone explain what happened to Keith Olbermann? Whether you agreed with him politically or not, Keith Olbermann was once a smart dude. Now, I don't know what the hell he is now. Can anyone explain what happened? Let me know. Sound off in the comments below. Like, subscribe, share the video. Appreciate your support. Best way to contact me is by email at btlkc84@gmail.com, and I'll see you guys later.